Ladies and gentlemen, or perhaps, listeners in the quiet of the evening, I invite you to settle back, close your eyes if you wish, and let me take you into a very different world, one that moves with the slow rhythm of bells tolling in the distance, of footsteps on soft earth, of hearths glowing in the night. Tonight, I would like to speak to you about how medieval peasants fell in love. It is not a subject filled with knights in shining armor or noble ladies in silks, though those stories dominate the tales of poets and troubadours. No, the reality was gentler, quieter, rooted in the soil, in the rhythm of the seasons, and in the soft glances exchanged when no one else was watching. If you imagine the Middle Ages, you may first think of castles on hills, of banners fluttering in the wind, but below those castles stretched the vast fields and small villages where most people lived their lives. The peasants were bound to the land, working long days, rising before dawn, and often collapsing with exhaustion at night. Yet even within those cycles of labor and duty, the heart found its way. It beat quietly, sometimes hesitantly, but always stubbornly, because love, in whatever age, slips into lives even when no one is looking for it. Love for medieval peasants often began at the village well, where young men and women gathered to draw water. It was one of the few places where people might linger without suspicion, exchanging words that seemed practical but carried undercurrents of feeling. A boy might comment on the weight of the bucket, or a girl might laugh at the way someone's hands were clumsy with the rope, and from that, a spark could grow. The well was not just about water, it was about connection, about chance meetings. The path to the well was walked daily, and sometimes the feet walked more eagerly than they admitted, simply because there was a chance of seeing someone there. There were festivals too, moments when the strict patterns of work loosened. At harvest time, when the crops were brought in, villagers would sometimes dance in the open fields, the music provided by a flute or drum, the laughter carrying into the night. In such moments, a young man might take the hand of a girl, and for a short time, the duties of the manor and the demands of the landlord faded away. The hand that held the sickle during the day might hold another hand more gently at night. These moments of music, fleeting as they were, left deep impressions. They became the memory a person carried into the long winter months, the memory that warmed them as much as the fire. And yet, we must remember, love for medieval peasants was not simply about romance. It was woven with duty, with the needs of survival, with the expectations of family and lord. Marriages were often arranged not by personal desire but by the careful weaving of families and land. A father might look at his daughter and think not of her laughter at the well but of what field might be gained, what debts might be eased, what ties might be strengthened. A son might be urged toward a girl because her family had animals to share or tools to lend. Love, therefore, was often hidden within these arrangements, a secret hope that affection might grow from practicality. But affection did grow. A young couple bound by arrangement might learn to care for one another as they worked side by side. Imagine a small wooden house with a thatched roof, the smell of smoke drifting through the cracks, the sound of rain pattering above. A husband might mend a tool while his wife kneaded bread, their lives entangled not just by ceremony but by every shared task. In the quiet exchanges of daily life, glances and smiles could bloom into something deeper. Love for peasants was not grand or flamboyant, but steady, tested by hardship, made resilient by necessity. And yet, desire and courtship had their ways of slipping past the walls of duty. There were games played on feast days, rough and loud, where boys chased girls through the village green, laughter echoing between wooden cottages. In those chases, sometimes clumsy, sometimes bold, feelings were revealed. There were May Day celebrations where garlands of flowers were hung, where maidens crowned their favorites with blossoms, a gesture small yet full of meaning. A crown of daisies could say more than 1,000 words. Courtship was often wordless, communicated through gifts. A carved wooden spoon offered shyly. A ribbon saved from a fair and given in secret. A token hidden in a sheaf of grain. These gestures were not extravagant, for extravagance was far beyond the reach of peasants, but they carried weight. When you had little, what you gave meant much. A small gift, a shared loaf of bread, even the offer to help with a heavy task, these were languages of love. Of course, life was not always kind to young lovers. Lords might interfere, demanding marriages that served their interests. The church had its rules too, placing boundaries around whom one could wed, forbidding unions within certain degrees of kinship. And yet, peasants found ways to bend the rules, to meet in barns or fields, to carve out moments of tenderness where none seemed possible. Songs and folk tales whispered in cottages told of such lovers, of the risks they took for even a fleeting embrace. Let us not forget that love was also shadowed by hardship. Life expectancy was short, work was grueling, and loss was frequent. A wife might bury her husband young, or a man might watch his beloved fall ill with little remedy to save her. Love in such a world carried the knowledge of fragility, which perhaps made it all the more precious. A stolen kiss behind a haystack, a shared smile across a crowded feast, these small things became treasures, remembered long after the moment passed. What we think of today as romance was often, for peasants, an intermingling of joy and necessity. To love someone was to share not only affection but the burden of toil. It was to sow seeds together, to gather harvests together, to share both hunger and plenty. It was to know that when the winter came and the wind rattled the shutters, there would be someone beside you to face the cold. Love was not a flight of fancy but a shelter against the hardships of life. And yet, the songs of the troubadours, though written for nobles, trickled down to the villages. Young people heard tales of knights who pined for unattainable ladies, of secret meetings beneath moonlit towers. Those stories stirred their imaginations, even if their own realities were more humble. A girl who had never seen a castle might still dream of a love that felt as deep and fateful as the songs described. A boy who plowed fields might still feel like a knight when he dared to walk a girl home at dusk. Dreams do not need fine clothes, they only need hearts willing to believe. We can picture, then, a summer's evening in a medieval village, the air heavy with the smell of earth and smoke. The sky deepens to a dusky blue. Children chase each other in the fading light, while the older villagers gather by the fire. Somewhere, two young people linger a little apart, pretending to look at the stars. Their words are few, but their presence is enough. They stand close, their shoulders brushing, and in that moment, the world seems to pause. No lord, no priest, no duty intrudes. There is only the quiet certainty that they are not alone in the vastness of their lives. This was love for medieval peasants, not written in books, not immortalized in poems, but lived in the earth beneath their feet, in the bread on their table, in the quiet gestures that sustained them. It was humble, fleeting, sometimes arranged, sometimes defiant, but always real. And when we imagine their lives, so different from ours, we might remember that even across centuries, even across the weight of history, the heart has always found its way. And so, as the night deepens and this story draws to its close, let us think of those simple lives, of the peasants who toiled and laughed and loved beneath the same stars that shine above us now. Their love was not grand, not sung in ballads, but it was enough to keep them going, enough to warm their nights, enough to remind them that even in hardship, joy was possible. And perhaps, in the end, that is all that love ever needs to be.